Welcome to All Things Greater Burlington, where you will hear from the movers, shakers, and changemakers that are moving Greater Burlington forward. Here is your host, Stephen Brody.
Welcome to All Things Greater Burlington. I had the pleasure of meeting our guest at one of our recent business after hours here in the Greater Burlington area. And after listening to his stories and wonderful experiences with his business, I thought, what a perfect guest to have on All Things Greater Burlington. And so it is a pleasure to have with us this morning Ethan King, co-owner of King Kleen. Ethan, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, Stephen.
So tell us, King Kleen is basically a window cleaning company that probably doesn't do it justice. So give the elevator pitch as to all things King Kleen.
Certainly. So yeah, it was kind of a weird identity to develop what it is, because I define it as an exterior cleaning and window cleaning company, because we do exterior cleaning. So we do pressure washing. We do what's called soft wash, which is a really interesting treatment that we have. But we also do window cleaning. We've done that one now. We can do it pretty much at any height. The highest we've been is 12 stories on the outside, but we're excited to go higher, and there's potentially some work coming down that's going to send us higher. So
and that is what really got me excited when we were talking at Business After Hours, and you were sharing all of these like Spider-Man experiences of you traversing these buildings at upper levels. I was fascinated by it. So let me back up before we get into that. How long has the business been around? And secondly, I guess what was the motivation to do this? Is this a niche that wasn't there? Is this something that you or your family thought, hey, we'd love to do this? How do you get into window cleaning?
that's a good question. And really the answer to that one, and I'll take that one first.
Okay.
Is I really never really, if you would have asked me 5 years ago and you would have said, what do you want to do in 5 years? Where are you going to be? Window cleaning is maybe the farthest thing away from what my thoughts were. So at that time...
Not that there's anything against window cleaning.
No. But at that time, I was in information technology. I was an information technology manager for a third-party logistics provider here in Burlington. And they taught me a lot of different things. But it was at a point in life where I needed to make some sort of a change. It started out as a hobby. Computers, totally self-taught. I don't have any college degrees. But it kind of got to a point where it's like, you know what? It's time for a change. It's time for me to do something. And I really had no idea what that was. But a friend of mine from Iowa City called me. He's like, hey, one of my workers is hurt. He actually runs a company similar to what we do in Iowa City.
Okay.
And his wife was injured. And he said, hey, do you mind coming in and helping me for a couple months? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have anything else to do. Because I am jobless currently.
Fielding all offers.
Yeah, exactly. And I helped out some friends with some carpentry stuff that they were doing here. And so I went up there and I did that for a while. And him and I talked about maybe partnering. And I wasn't crazy about moving up to Iowa City and living up there or driving back and forth. It's a little longer than I want to drive. But then his wife decided that she wanted to come back and do her thing. And she really enjoys this. There is something that is... some days very satisfying about it. So she came back and she started doing her thing, and he's like, you can totally do this back in Burlington. And I'm like, I don't know. But I decided, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And what I found out was that there was a niche for it. There was something that Burlington needed that I could provide. And so I started doing that. And the cool thing about Burlington that I didn't realize is that there is kind of an interesting pedigree and it's a funny thing to say, a pedigree or maybe a legacy in Burlington. So a lot of people know Brightway was one of the main companies, but what a lot of people don't know is that the original owner of Brightway actually created a tool called the Ledger that is used by window cleaners all around the world. And
Really?
as far as I know, it's still made here in Burlington.
Oh,
And so I'm like, that's kind of a cool thing to continue.
yeah.
And so he had that kind of ingenuity, and that's what he went to afterwards. And I'm like, you know what? I can carry on that ingenuity and do different things and become different things in order to serve it. Kind of, I don't know. It seems like it's a little hokey when I say that, but
Yeah.
so this started at the end of 2019,
Okay.
and the end of 2019 was great, and then COVID happened in 2020, and a lot of crazy things came from that. But we weathered that storm, and so now we've been. I think that makes 3 years now.
I would think that COVID wouldn't have affected you that much because you're not going into businesses too much. I wouldn't think that you're interacting with a lot of individuals. So, did COVID really have much of an impact on your business?
It actually did.
Interesting.
So when we started, my original plan for this, which has kind of morphed and changed a lot over the last couple of years, was to be mostly residential. And so our residential seasons are spring and fall.
Sure.
All around the spring and fall cleaning seasons.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is COVID landed spring of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So that was most of my customer base was not interested, obviously, and for wise reasons.
makes sense,
To
sure.
not have someone in their home.
Yeah.
So that meant for the better part of 2020, I didn't have a whole lot of work. And at that point, we really hadn't branched out and done a lot of the commercial stuff.
Okay. So initially then, Ethan, were you wanting to focus just on residential, but COVID kind of created the necessity to expand, and that
did.
kind of got you to look at commercial.
That's what got me to look more at commercial, because my friend that originally got me into it, he did mostly residential. He didn't even like commercial routes. And so once we got into it, we realized that we did like it a little bit. Well, they both served their place.
Yeah.
So
Did you have to, I would imagine then that you had to invest in different equipment, branching now into commercial versus residential.
yeah.
Is there such a thing as different equipment?
For the most part, the traditional tools are the same. We do have some pulls that we've had to purchase that were specialized for higher areas. So, for instance, we did some things on a school here that required a pole to be longer. So we had to go out and purchase an extension for some of our poles and certain things. So there are some things that are specialized, and then when we get into the higher areas, then yeah, it's important to be able to access those areas, and it requires tools that we wouldn't use on a 1 or 2 story home.
Sure. And how have you been successful in getting your name out to the community and letting people know that you are here and this is the service that you provide?
Well, we try to keep a very good social media presence. So that's several posts a week, that kind of stuff, just letting people know that we're here and that we're doing the things. We partnered with a company that's really good at helping you create and establish a website with proper SEO and all that kind of stuff. But that was something interesting, again, with bringing different people in. So when my partner joined, she says, what about the Burlington Partnership, the Greater Burlington Partnership? What about the Chamber of Commerce and investing in that a little bit? And I thought, well, I really hadn't thought about that, but we're just a window cleaning company. So then when we did that, we started getting in contact with a lot of the local businesses and seeing what other owners were doing. And then the other cool thing too, especially with things like business after hours, is we get to go in and see what these other companies are doing with their buildings and with their establishments.
Yeah.
And then whatever you can take from life and use and apply in your life, just makes your life better, I personally think. So that's been awesome to see. And then it's been great also to create those contacts with other business leaders.
Well, and I want to thank you and Heidi as well for being involved with the partnership. I mean, you've definitely embraced being a part of the community and being a part of the Chamber of Commerce. You came to the new member luncheon. You've been to Business After Hours. Heidi is a member of the ambassadors. And so I really appreciate you taking that extra step and doing that to network. Now, the other thing that I have to ask about as well is the shirts. the clothing. It looks like you guys are ready to go do the Tour de France, right? There obviously was some thought behind that. So talk about the uniform and how you came about to that.
It is definitely hard to miss, and we are very often teased. I actually have some friends that call it my own clothing brand. But it is, so we are actually going to leave tomorrow for an industry conference. And in the industry we're in, more on the soft wash, pressure washing side of it, uniforms, and of course, when you have a team, they need to all look relatively the same. That's all part of your brand and all that. But so there's actually a lot of people, and they all have individual styles, and some of them cite where they come from and services they offer and that kind of stuff. It's important to be seen, and it's important to especially put out that professionalism, which is what we try to do, even with our crazy flashy bike shirts. But so yeah, it was trying to throw a little bit of individuality in there and do things that matter to us, so that people see who we are and recognize that brand. Because that's what we'd like to do, is create that awareness locally.
I think you've succeeded. I mean, I would like to think so. I mean, It's like, oh, there's the folks with the orange uniforms. You know, it's got to be King Kleens in the house.
We're
right?
definitely hard to miss.
Right. Yeah. How was it to get your business off the ground? Did anyone have prior experience, or did you have to seek out assistance in starting up the business?
Sure. No, there was a lot of assistance that was required. So I came into this again with an IT background.
Yeah.
I had no idea about different things, and there's a lot of interesting sciences to this that I didn't even know when I got into it. I was just like, this is the thing we do. So there was a lot of YouTube University, a lot of Google food that happened. But then the other thing too is I started reaching out to some of my friends that are local, some in Iowa, different parts, and I started asking questions. And that was really, really kind of the turning point for a lot of that knowledge, is just growing that homegrown network of people that you can say, hey, you know what, I've got a dumb question. I would really love an answer on it because I'm not sure how to handle this or to do this thing. And I still do that. Like, we have big projects. What's the best way for me to tackle this? What should I try? How should I do spot tests? And how should I prepare myself for demos? And then we also have large communities too. So for our industry, there's a community called Spray Wash Academy that we're part of. And what that actually is protecting customers' property while we're doing some of our things like soft wash, because it is a process that certain delicate plants or whatnot can be disturbed by. Not so much here in Iowa, because a lot of things grow in Iowa.
Yeah.
But obviously you don't want to kill someone's aquatic life if they've got fish or something that's very sentimental to them. So we take every precaution we can. So embracing those communities, and then also leaning on friends in the area.
Yeah. The equipment that you use for your job, is it specialized enough where you have to go to certain vendors, or are there things that you can actually get locally here?
A little bit of both. So there are some things that we get here locally. Great Western Supply has been good at getting us some stuff. They're awesome. There is some things that are quite specialized. So, for instance, we have some pumps and whatnot that we actually go to a supplier who's also a really good friend of ours up in McGregor, Iowa. So we try to keep it in Iowa as much as possible. And then, of course, there are some things that are hard to service here and hard to get here. So we do have to go. But whenever we can, we try to source those things locally. Yeah. It just depends on what it is, yeah.
When you go to a business and to potentially service, what are the things that you have to look out for? What are the things that you're, I guess, reviewing and inspecting to know, in order for us to do this, in order for us to do this well, this is what we need to do. This is what you need to be aware of.
Certainly. And that's where it's kind of dependent on the service that we're looking to provide. So for windows, it's what type of window is it? Is it a storm? How high is it? how old is it? I mean, we've serviced some windows here in Burlington for residential customers that had metal storms on them, so we actually had to like pry them away from the frames very gently.
Oh my!
It was crazy. It was a nerve-wracking day. But for certain things, like for instance, soft wash, it's what kind of material are we trying to clean? Whether it's wood, whether it's a type of metal that's going to change colors while we apply our chemical to it, because there are certain chemicals, some certain substrates, certain metals especially that will have a negative reaction. What are things that we have to water, cover, take out of the area? How do we tackle that? So it is very much when we do a site review or a site survey, we'll actually go in and try to figure out what is it tailored. So for instance, we gave a really itemized quote to Burlington Community School District. They've been awesome to work with. And so we had to go through and it's like, okay, what are we talking about here? We need to define that scope of work. And that's why we try to get really good at is being professional at defining what our work is, especially with the business, and then how we can work with them in order to provide them a service that they need.
You really need to know like the different types of windows because that determines whether you can just clean them as is or whether you literally have to remove them, right?
Yeah.
To then do what you need to do.
Certainly. Yeah, the windows are just part of it. Have to know certain types of windows. Have to understand if certain abrasives will scratch them. Have to understand what kind of coatings that might be on them, whether or not they have some form of a tint. There's a lot of different things that kind of go into it. Access is always a concern. So how high is it? Do we have proper anchorage on site? What do we have to bring as far as tools in order to even reach or get into that area?
You touched upon it early on about being up high. How high have you been so far? What's the highest story, I guess, that you have been in cleaning a window?
So the highest story, and we got into this just this year, so I haven't gone super high, but we got into it in January, and then in February, a really good friend of mine asked if I wanted to help subcontract and help a franchise in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And so we were down in Bartlesville, and that hospital was 12 stories. That was the first drop I'd ever done outside of the classroom, and it was nerve-wracking.
And this was outside? Oh, my.
Yep, it was
in January?
In February, yeah.
Okay, and how cold was it?
It was actually warmer those days. It was in the 40s, high 40s, or late 50s, or high 40s, low 50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, interesting question then to ask. Is there a temperature level outdoors? Is there a threshold where you can't do it if it falls below a certain temperature?
It's dependent on the service. So if it's a pressure washing service, then around freezing, obviously, we don't ever want to create ice that's somebody's gonna slip on. For the window cleaning thing, it's more a comfort level.
Okay.
In the winter, not so much on residential, but more on the commercial stuff in the winter. We can still clean windows when there's snow falling. We can clean windows in the rain, all sorts of different things. It's more of a whether or not we feel like it. So I start to lose feeling in my hands, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's a little cold to
Probably
do this.
not a good thing.
Yeah, we can reschedule this to a day that works better for us.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have to be worried about the cold and stuff, it's always going to provide a better product.
Yeah.
So
back to the 12-story, was it a hospital you said?
it was a hospital.
Okay. So how do you get up there?
That's a good question.
I'm glad.
Every building is different. For that one in particular, and it was kind of made a little bit more difficult because of their COVID restrictions that they had going on at that time. Basically, what we'd do from ground level is we'd jump in an elevator. We'd go up as high as we could, and then it stairs the rest of the way onto the roof. We exit out onto the roof, and then we do our rigging and whatnot. And then there's certain things that we look out for, that we've been trained to look out for, that OSHA even requires us to do. So we took a class that was actually another friend of mine in January, and we got authorized by the IWCA, which is the International Window Cleaners Association, to actually in safety. So basically that says, hey, I understand the dangers and stuff, They don't want us, of course, going near low parapet walls, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
then, are you rappelling down from the roof down to the floor?
Yep. Wow. Yep. We rappel from the roof down. People always go, that sounds terrifying. And really, there's some days it is terrifying. That was one of the days.
What makes it terrifying? Is it if it's windy, if it's just the fact that you're out there?
It's the unknown. Like there's nothing natural about throwing both your legs off of a 12-story building. It will never be natural to me. It will never be one of those things that I'm like, oh, yawn. And the day it is probably the day I'm in a lot of danger. But yeah, it's that moment where all your weight leaves sitting on the parapet wall and you swing the other leg over and you're about 3/4 of the way over. And then the moment before you rest out into your chair and then you realize your harness and everything grabs you, then that's probably the most exhilarating point. And then after a couple of days, it starts to be pretty normal. But yeah, it's crazy. It's fun though.
So what's more exciting, Ethan, the rappelling or the cleaning?
Well, see, that's the crazy thing. And my partner actually told me this. He says, once you get down there and you realize what it is, it's just work.
Yeah.
Like it's no different than a storefront or residential. It's just you're 10 stories up.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a lot of fun. Like it's a different type of clean than you're going to, of course, give somebody on their home. Like we're not expected to be as thorough for hanging off ropes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. You put your music in, you start singing, you start dancing, you start doing the things, and you just get your work done. So.
How many of you are working at the same time?
So there's two of us that are doing the rappelling.
Yeah.
It's me and my partner. We like to work in kind of a buddy system. We do it all the time. Well, not all the time. We do it on our own. But when we come together on the big jobs, it's nice to have that partner there, somebody you can call on the radio and say, hey, I need to be saved. Because if there ever is a situation where something is malfunctioned or something like that, then it rests on the other person to save whoever is in danger. So.
Have you been on any buildings where you talk about rappelling?
Mm-hmm.
Do any of those buildings have, and I don't know what it's called, those structures that...
The aerial platforms?
Okay, aerial platform where you can pulley that like up and down. Have you used those on any? I
have not used those yet on any. And then actually over 300 feet, if those exist, we have to use them. I feel more comfortable on my ropes just because they're mine. Okay. They haven't sat on top of a building or anything like that. Yeah. So for instance, I noticed the Burlington, they were doing that masonry work down there and they had those. And I'm like, I think, because I know legally I can still use my ropes, I think I would rather use my ropes than something like that, just because I take care of them, I clean them.
Yeah.
I know my equipment. And there's a lot in that moment where both your legs are hanging over the side and you switch from your upper body strength to just sitting down in your chair, where it's like you have to trust your equipment or it's going to be a bad day.
Yeah.
So...
Well, I know that we've got some time left, and I want to make sure that I give you time to talk about your latest and greatest toy that you have added to your service, and that is this drone.
Yes.
You got to talk about this drone and what is going to make this so fun to use.
The drone, like a lot of this sounded crazy when it was originally like proposed. So we had a customer in Iowa City that approached us, and they have a building that is very hard for us to rappel. So the next option really for that at that height is to do a lift, and that's costly. For a customer, that's a lot, especially as the cost of fuel and everything is going up. Diesel for a lift is a lot. So we were trying to figure out how to tackle this, some things that we've done in the past, and my dad actually was in on the meeting, and he goes, what about a drone? And I'm like, a drone? That sounds insane. He's like, remember we saw him last year at the conference? And I'm like, well, let's kind of look at it and see if it's feasible for us to do. And so we made this purchase, and we're trying to get some people interested, and we even have some partners that are saying, hey, we've got some stuff we'll give you, just because we don't want to operate at that level anymore. So yeah, it is a drone. We can actually wash entire buildings with this drone. It's quite the investment. Scares me a little bit. It's a pretty big investment, but
It's a drone that you hook a hose up to, right, from the ground, and then you basically elevate it up. And what, power wash or whatever?
So we have a pump in the van that's capable of producing 11 gallons a minute at 300 psi, and then we run hoses to where our staging area will be, and then we have a hose as an umbilical that runs up to the drone.
Wow.
And currently with the FAA, how they have all the rules and everything restricted and worked out for safety purposes, all of that has to be under 55 pounds, and so that limits us to about 110 feet. But yeah, with that, we can push some of our soft wash chemicals up there and clean buildings. We can clean windows with that, with purified water. There's a lot of different things that we can do. And with that comes kind of this different certification that we have. We've gotten several different certifications over the years just for cleaning, which seems kind of crazy to say. But the Part 107 is what I'm currently working on, and that's a commercial drone pilot license. Anytime that you do anything that requires any sort of reimbursement or any sort of payment, then the FAA requires that you have that, which is smart. There's a lot that goes into this that I didn't even really know, and it's part of the same thing that part of the same test that actual pilots go through. So it's been kind of a neat, fun learning experience.
Yeah, you were talking about that before we started, where you actually have to get clearance. You have to be in contact with the airport or whatever authority there is to make sure that you've got the clearance to fly the drone.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me because you're not there at the airport, but yet you have to make sure that they're aware that something's flying.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess doesn't come into contact with something else.
Doesn't come in contact with a plane. Yeah. So we're all using the same airspace. And it's funny. So at the point that a plane takes off or at the point that a plane lands, we're sharing the same airspace with them, even though we're only 110 feet from the ground while we're cleaning. So it's important for us to understand, because we're the smaller aircraft, that we have to stay out of their way.
Yeah.
So like in Burlington, with how Burlington is set up here, it's Class E airspace to the ground, which requires me to get in contact with and get approval from the air traffic control or ATC so that I can perform operations in Burlington. Different places are different. Iowa City does not have that in some of the areas that we'll be working in Iowa City. And then when we go out to Ohio, because we have some stuff out there that we do, it also will not require ATC approval. So you have to kind of know the lay of the land. You have to know the weather. You have to know the capabilities and performance of your tool or your unmanned aerial aircraft, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and how far in advance do you think you have to notify the airport authority of the job that you're going to be doing?
That's a good question. I do not know at this time. I think it's 30 to 90 days. I need to double check. Yeah, so it requires quite a bit. So when we use that, it'll be on jobs that, of course, we have scheduled out pretty far.
You'll have to.
Yeah, exactly. But I need to double check that, to be honest. I don't know the detail of that as of yet. But yeah, so in Burlington, we're going to go outside of that area whenever we're flying it, because I need to test fly it the next couple weeks. So.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time, Ethan, and I've so enjoyed this conversation. If people want to get a hold of you, King Kleen, how do they do that to find out about you and your services?
So our website is kingkleen.biz. Really, that's where I like to push everybody because our phone number's on there.
And King Kleen is both with K's.
Yes. It's a weird spelling.
Yeah. So
it's
KING.
KLEEN. Mm-hmm.
Okay. .biz is the website. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. And on there is a request form for a quote. Our number's on there, and you can dial that. Right now, that is a voicemail that it gets sent to, or there is the option to actually talk to the owner, Heidi. And she's very knowledgeable, and she can get that answered. That connects right to her cell phone. I'd love to make it eventually so that it's a call-in service that you actually talk to somebody every time you call.
Yeah.
But that's the goal for right now. And that's really the best way. And then our phone number, which escapes me at the moment, can actually be texted, but it's on the website. Yeah,
Sure.
It's 319-380-KING. So I think it's 5464.
Well, and if anybody wants to know anything more about that, they can certainly go to the Greater Burlington Partnership's website at greaterburlington.com. We've got you in the member directory, and they can pull up that information as well.
Certainly.
So,
Certainly.
Ethan, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a joy and a pleasure. Continued success, and I can't wait to see that drone flying around cleaning buildings.
Yes, me either. It'll be a ride. It'll be fun.
Well, we appreciate you listening to All Things Greater Burlington. Be sure and like and subscribe. Tell your friends, and we look forward to seeing you next time on All Things Greater Burlington.
You have been listening to All Things Greater Burlington with Stephen Brody. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to catch all new episodes. To learn more about All Things Greater Burlington, visit greaterburlington.com/ATGB.